welcome to Season 2 of the Culinary Saijiki podcast. This season, I'm going back to haiku's roots, pun intended, and focusing on how agriculture and food show up in the work of the classical poets. For more food and haiku goodness, you can read the blog at culinarysaijiki.com. And if you would like to be a guest this season, go to the blog and fill out the contact form. You can support the project by going to buymeacoffee.com/culinarysaijiki or simply share this show with whoever you think would enjoy it. All right, let's get started with today's topic. All right, welcome to this episode. Just a note that you might hear a car drive by because I am sitting in a parking garage recording this. I was away at the family farm for the weekend and did not bring all my recording stuff, but then I have a Pilates session this evening and an awkward amount of time between the end of work and my session, and I figured, well, I might as well just sit in my car and get my recording done so I don't have to do it when I get home from my workout. Weird circumstances, but trying to make the most of the time I have in a meaningful way. Anyway, before I get started on today's solo episode, there is going to be a community open mic coming up in just about a month. That'll be published August 30th, so actually like a little more than a month. But the deadline will be August 26th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time, and the theme will be transitions. I'll say a little more about that at the end of the episode. And I'll post the voice memo link in the show notes. Over on the blog, last week I put up a post about cherry and plum blossoms and why I decided to take those out of the project, why I decided to stop collecting haiku around those two things. It's a pretty long post, so go check it out if you are interested. So today I wanted to talk about the idea of technique versus content. Not that these two things are diametrically opposed. They should not be. They work together. But this was something that came up for me earlier in the year and that I've been thinking about and wanted to do a post about. Late last year, I did a guest workshop for the Poetry P podcast on food as kigo in haiku. And for my judge's choice, I selected a haiku from Krista Pandy. And I will read that because it ended up sparking my thoughts about this episode. Christmas Tamales. Immigrants try out Texas traditions. Christmas Tamales. Immigrants try out Texas traditions. So this was my judge's choice. I wrote commentary for it, which I'm not going to reread all of that commentary here. You should go check out the Poetry P podcast episode or buy the newest copy of the journal to see what I had to say. But Krista wrote to me, and obviously if your judge's choice, you're happy about that, but she did make this note that really stuck with me, that she was surprised in my annotation that I had focused on sort of the content, the story of her haiku versus the technique. And that got me thinking about why I did that, because this haiku does have some excellent use of poetic technique, and I was certainly aware of that. But my whole commentary is about sort of what tamales represent as a food and getting into historical and political issues from that angle. So technique, first of all, it could be things that are specific to haiku, such as the use of the kigo, the use of the cutting word, 3 lines versus 1 line, things like that. So there are elements specific to haiku. Those are part of the technique. Poetry P has covered many of those, as have plenty of other places, but if you're looking for something podcast-oriented. And it could also be other poetic devices, alliteration, assonance, consonants, enjambment, a whole host of them, which we use more or less in English language haiku, and some people have very strong opinions as to whether or not you should even use them. Content, fundamentally it's about that haiku moment, but it can actually have a larger story. And you know what? I have decided I was not going to read my commentary, but I am going to read it because I want you to know what I said about Krista's haiku, because it is germane to the discussion. You should still go and check out Poetry P, though, if you have not already, both that episode and the new journal. So one more time, her haiku. Christmas tamales. Immigrants try out Texas traditions. And my annotation is that the tamale is a quintessential Texas holiday food, in part because making a large batch of them is labor-intensive and requires the participation of many family members. Tamales are a Mexican dish first documented in 1519 in what is now the state of Veracruz. In my lifetime, the state of Texas has always had an unfortunately hostile relationship toward the Mexican and Central American immigrants that cross its borders, whether documented or not. However, Texas has always been a site for immigrants. The port of Galveston was as busy as Ellis Island in the early 20th century, despite not being as famous. Central Texas is also well known for its German communities. In fact, Crystal City, Texas, housed an internment camp for Germans in World War II. In the present day, while immigrants from India are in second place, followed by El Salvador and then Vietnam. It should be noted that Mesoamerican countries such as El Salvador also have their own versions of tamales. Krista Pandy's haiku is deceptively simple, but in 3 lines she evokes not just a season, but also the evolving nature of a food, as well as the complicated nature of immigration in the United States. In this short commentary, I don't have the space to elaborate on the complexities of Mexican, Spanish, and United States politics, but for those of us versed in that history, food becomes a contentious ground for exploring history and heritage. I imagine the immigrants in this haiku are of European and or Asian ancestry. They are trying a new holiday tradition that is connected not just to the warmth and connection of family, but also the fraught nature of history. This is a haiku that manages to bring depth through seasonal associations. So that is what I had to say about Krista's haiku, and it is focused on content. But I will say, the form, it's there, and I think perhaps the reason I didn't comment on it, well, part of it is that I am more focused on content in general. I just am at this point. I'll get to that in a second. I also, I might have overlooked some of the formal aspects because they are well done, and they're so well done that they're not obvious, and not in a bad way. It's like, in a house, you don't want your stud wall, you don't want your structure to be visible, right? And so I think that's what Krista has done here is the structure it's there. It's supporting the content very well, but it's covered up the way that, in a house, we want the structure to be. But anyway, Krista's comment that I had focused on the content rather than the form, it got me thinking. In Krista's haiku, I want to point out, there's a great use of consonants in here. Christmas tamales. Immigrants try out Texas traditions. So the S there is what I'm really latching onto. That repeated end S sound. That is done incredibly well. It took me a lot of readings before I even noticed it. And I think honestly, on the page, it doesn't come out quite as strongly as when you read it aloud. And that's not a criticism. I think that points to the way that simply looking at a poem with your eyes versus saying it out loud changes the way you experience it. Again, not a fault with the poem. It's really just pointing out the media, the way we encounter a poem. Whether we hear it, we say it, we read it, it does make a difference. And that's why I think it's good to read work aloud, and try to see and hear things from different angles. Anyway, those ending S sounds, excellent. There's also a lot of T in there. Christmas, tamales, immigrants, try out, Texas traditions. And the T's are mostly at the start of the word, a little bit at the end, a little bit in the middle. I'm really impressed the way that Krista did work that sense of consonants in there. It's really well done. I think I made this episode because I sort of felt bad that I never commented on that. But the fact is that this haiku kept me up at night because I think the structure, the form was done so well that I could focus on the content. And I think in excellent haiku, it's not just one or the other. You've got to have both. If your form is all over the place, too many readers think what you're doing is not a haiku, and I don't really even want to wade into that debate. That's a whole thing, right? But if from a formal perspective, it is not recognized as a haiku in any way. And again, that's subjective on some level, and there's a lot of debates about that. But if the form's not there, the content's not going to come across as well. And maybe you have incredible form, but if the content doesn't resonate, well, what's the point? So fundamentally, we do need both. It's not mutually exclusive. But I also think that whether we're conscious of it or not, we lean toward one or the other in our own practice. That is just my opinion. But it's one that I think is true, and certainly having edited the HSA annual anthology this year, still in progress, or editing Haiku Girl Summer. So I've just been doing a ton of editing the past few months and just reading a lot of submissions. I really do think that's true. We tend to favor one or the other. And I also think as editors, we are, consciously or not, we're more invested in one or the other. And again, I would say that's most people. These are generalizations. They cannot apply to everybody. And that doesn't make one a bad or better editor. It just, we have our sort of biases. We have our interests. Whether it's a general reader or where it's an editor, they respond to both the form and the content. Absolutely. And the way those two things work together. But when it comes down to, say, making an editorial choice about what to include in a publication, you're probably going to place more of an emphasis on one thing or the other. And on reflection, based on Krista's comment, I find myself more drawn to the content of a haiku than the form. And you know what? This surprises me, given my poetic life before I became focused on haiku. I have an MFA in poetry. I have studied a lot of poetic form over the years. I have a BA in Lit, an MA in Lit, plus the MFA. So I've spent a lot of time studying various poetic forms, both in school and independently. I spent a lot of time working through various different forms, many of them poorly, because I wanted to understand them. And that really helped me develop a poetic voice, even though I wrote mostly free verse. For many years, my favorite poetic form was the villanelle, which is a really tricky one. I love it, but it's very difficult. But so I was immersed in form for years. So to find myself now generally more interested in content does surprise me. Do I have hypotheses about this? I mean, I have definitely thought it over. I think part of it might be I just got bored of form from so much studying of it, but I'm not even sure that's true. I think because I spent so much time, again, studying it for years and years and years, I don't have to think about it as much. It is, when it's done well, it is the structure of the house that I don't see. Or it's the joke about the fish. Two fish are swimming, and one fish says, "The water's nice today," and the other fish says, "What's water?" I have totally botched that joke. Sorry. But it's a joke used to illustrate that when we're immersed in something, we don't necessarily perceive it. And I think I spent so much time involved with form that, especially when it's something like working with alliteration or assonance or consonants, when it's done well, I'm just not going to notice it because it's not something I'm necessarily looking for in haiku. And when it's done well, it doesn't draw attention to itself. Regardless, I do find that I really love delving into the content of a short 3-line poem. And certainly that makes sense in the context of this culinary saijiki project, in terms of the scope. Certainly when I have done some annotations of haiku for blog posts, I have focused on the form, but fundamentally, when we're thinking about how food functions in haiku, a lot of it is going to be content oriented. Who knows, maybe once I have completed this particular project in a few years, I'll delve really hardcore into the technique of things. Who knows? Everything fluctuates. And I want to say that I responded to Krista's because of the larger illusion that it made. That is really what my annotation for Poetry P was all about. Yes, the technique is strong. The technique is there. But literally this haiku kept me up at night. And I had actually thought I was going to pick a different haiku for Poetry P. And then 4 a.m, I can't sleep, and I'm thinking about Krista's haiku. So then I knew I had to pick it, because if a poem is literally is what you're thinking about when you have insomnia, then yes, it's a winner. When I'm lying awake at 4 a.m, I'm not thinking about how the use of the S and T are used. I was thinking of how, in such a short poem, Krista wrote this just absolutely incredible piece that alludes to something that is so much bigger than the haiku itself. On the surface, it is about immigrants in Texas trying out something new. But my annotation really tried to delve into the far reach of that, how far into history and politics it goes. It really sparked something in me, and I was just so impressed with how she managed to make that happen. And I'll just say, from the standpoint of an editor, yes, upon reflection, that's what that's a thing I love, is I love when someone can pull off a haiku that relates to something that is so much bigger than itself, that has the potential to go both broad and deep, that can really reach beyond that initial haiku moment. And that is super challenging. And please, I'd hate to have you all think that when you're writing haiku for the community open mic or the community blog post, that is all I want to see. It's not all I want to see. Not every haiku has to do that. Not every haiku should do that. It's not every haiku's job to try to reach beyond the moment. For some it is, and for some it isn't. So please don't get a complex of, anytime you're submitting something to somewhere where I'm an editor, that I'm looking for something that really delves into history or philosophy. I'm not. I'm just saying that I have a soft spot for that. But you know what? I also have a soft spot for haiku that make me laugh. So it takes all kinds. There is room for all kinds of haiku in my world. And certainly there is, I think, a challenge, not just to writing haiku like Krista's, that really can go deep, but there's a challenge to the reader in that, look, we can't know everything. I bet there are plenty of haiku out there that I've read that have incredible elusive power that I've missed because I don't know everything and I don't know what I don't know. I am a person who absolutely will go and look up references that I don't understand, but sometimes you don't even know what the reference is. So if you don't know that there's a reference to look up, you are going to miss it. So that, that is a drawback, but even with that, I can't help but be drawn to those haiku when I see them. It is a real moment of engagement and joy for me. But again, it is not the be-all, end-all of haiku. It is certainly not even the be-all, end-all for me. I will always love just a really well-executed haiku in the moment. But I'm going on about this today because it has been something that's been on my mind ever since Krista mentioned it to me. So that really wraps up my thoughts on this. And I hope you enjoyed my rambles and my struggles I outlined this whole thing and of course can't read my handwriting. So, yeah, I love doing these solo episodes, but I am looking forward to getting some guests on the podcast. I will be reaching out to some of those people this week because I want to talk to them. It's fun to let other people do the talking once in a while. So, just a reminder that I will this week open up the submissions for the community open mic episode. You will have plenty of time, but might as well get it in sooner rather than later, right? And that the theme is transition. The theme your haiku should involve food. And I went with transition because, again, it'll be posting August 30th. By the haiku calendar, we'll already be, we'll be in or wrapping up early fall, basically. But in the United States, we are transitioning into fall, at least culturally. September still tends to be pretty warm in much of the country. It doesn't feel particularly autumn-like. I think it used to. Ben Ga and I had a whole conversation about like how movies point out that September used to like legit, especially late September, used to legit be colder in many parts of the world. And I certainly remember as a small child September being more autumn-y than it is anymore, it seems. Blame that on climate change. But even if it still feels like summer in much of the country, it is definitely turning into autumn in other parts of the country, don't get me wrong. And also, it's culturally autumn. While a lot of schools start in August, that we sort of culturally have like Labor Day is when cultural autumn starts. It's certainly when I think the pumpkin spice lattes come out. I really look, I've always been more of a peppermint mocha person, but if you're into pumpkin spice lattes, like, more power to you. But I really think, just like I think it is, unacceptable to have Christmas decorations before the day after Thanksgiving, I believe it is unacceptable to sell pumpkin spice lattes before Labor Day. You can wear your white pants all year round, your white shoes, your white whatever. I'm not, certainly not one to comment on fashion, but I don't know. In a world where everything is so malleable, I just like boundaries around certain times of the year. And I just feel like the pumpkin spice latte should come after Labor Day. Unpopular opinion, but that's where I am. Anyway, so because late August, early September is a time where we do start transitioning into cultural autumn and in some places actual autumn, that's why I picked that. So transition is the theme, include food, and please do make it, PG-13. I want to keep this something you could listen to, with your kids. So, all right. If you want to support this show financially, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/culinary-saijiki. Haiku North America, like listening to that episode that had some really great sound equipment from the Mercantile Library, it did inspire me to want to actually up my equipment game a little bit and invest in a better mic and invest in something I could use to maybe record in a coffee shop without, the sound getting overwhelming. So that is, after quite a bit of time making this show, that's something I'm finally ready to invest in. So, but anyway, if you are not inclined to support things financially, just, share this ramble with whoever you think would be interested. And stay tuned because, again, I'm really excited for other people who are interested in being part of the show. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you for listening.